Dobar dan. And Vala for the weather. It makes me feel at home. Although I know it was very nice yesterday, but today it makes me feel at home. Just before I start, has everybody got a phone? Good, okay. I'd like to put it to you that you are digital nomads that wander around making connections with your phones. And just a quick question. How many, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but raise your hand if you sleep with your phone. How many of you sleep with your phone next to you? Yeah. Not your husband, not your dog, not your cat, your phone is next to you. Okay, back to the future. I think this is a little bit about changing why and how we teach, not what we teach so much. I'll talk a little bit this afternoon about digital nomads, a bit more. But when I started thinking about this title, Back to the Future, I thought of the British education system, and I thought I'd just do a quick look at that to see how that has changed. So this focuses on the school system. And I started looking back at 1944 was the Butler Education Act, which was quite radical at the time because it was after the war and there was a new social compact. And the British decided to have three types of school. They would have grammar schools, technical schools, and secondary modern schools, which was meant to be for the diversity of types of people in the population, young people in the population. So the grammar schools were those that were academically gifted. The technical schools were for those that were going to work in industry. And this has been a problem for Britain for a long time, because we're always trying to do technical education like the Germans. And we've been trying to do this since the 1890s, but we're rubbish at it. And then the other one was the secondary modern, which was for everybody else. And we tested people at age 11, and then they went here, 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 here. So originally, this was supposed to be about diversity, about difference. But you know, the British can make difference into a hierarchy very easily. So we made it into a hierarchy, so the grammar schools were considered the best. We didn't really make any technical schools, and then we had the secondary modern. So it was a good idea to start with, but it was very divisive. So by the next bit along, by the 1960s, everything, you know what happened in the 60s? We had all those, you know, the Paris stuff and all that, you know, everybody was being revolting, revolution and all that kind of thing, and being more progressive. And so we had a very progressive thing called the Schools Council History Project. Now, in both of these eras, the government wasn't really involved. The government just said, this is the pattern, this is the structure for education, go do it, kind of thing. So we had comprehensive schools where all of those three schools merged into one. So we had the same kind of school, everybody in the same school, and that was very progressive. And the policies promoted criticality and diversity. There was an increase in examinations. In the past, a lot of people didn't do examinations. They went straight into industry and worked on apprenticeships and things like that. And then we had the oil crisis, the next one along, the 1990s. We had introduced, when I first started teaching in 1985, 86, we had then the national curriculum, which was a response to globalization, an early response to globalization and the loss of all the industry in the UK. And this was a direct response of government to try and compete globally, to make sure we had the right people in the right skills for the right jobs for the coming future. And this was a central policy, and they introduced league tables, and they introduced inspectors, and all the rest of it. And then from 2000 onwards, we had total marketization of schools. The school head teachers got the money. It wasn't local anymore, it wasn't democratic, it was just government controlled. Everybody has to fit in with the national standards. So in my quest for back to the future, in this age that we're in now, the digital age, where do I look? Where were the best policies for collaborative learning, for connected learning, for people to work together in disparate groups to come like that? And I think this is the best place to look for the progressive policies. So Back to the Future is really about, what do we know already and what can we borrow from that part to do things in the future. So I have some key questions. So my first question is, what are we educating people for? Okay, because we have to know, before we go on our grand plans and big projects, we have to think, well, what's the point? What's the point of education in the 21st century? We know that the disruption of the digital technology is going to continue with machine learning and artificial intelligence. It's going to be twice as rapid as it was from 2000. So we have to be clever about what is enduring from the past that we can use in the present and the future. So it was a lot easier in the 20th century. I went to a small school in a small village in the north of England, and when you left that school, you could either go to the sweet factory and work making sweets, or you could go to the brake lining factory and work making brake linings, or you could join the army, or you could be a builder. That was it, basically. And most of my friends did one of those 4 things. I was the only one in my school that went to university, or did qualifications even. So it was a lot easier then, but then the factories disappeared. So now what is the industry? What are we developing people for industry? Are we developing them into better humans? What are we doing? What's the philosophy? So what skills, attributes, values, and capabilities do we want to promote within the young people that we work with? Yeah? And again, I looked for some inspiration from 1943, some from 2018, some from 1965. There's this fantastic guy called Lawrence Stenhouse who talks a lot about curricula and process and humanity, which is very, very, very interesting. They're all typed on old typewriters. They're on the internet, but they're typed on old typewriters, but they're on the internet. But they're really interesting stuff. And then there's this one at the bottom there. So we've got success may be evidenced by broad qualities such as accuracy, relevance, and developing resilience. More particular virtues include valor, compassion, and grace. This is 1943. This is the guy that wrote the Butler Education Act in 1944, this guy, Norwood. And then we've got the QAA is the Quality Assurance Agency for Higher Education in the UK, and they've just come out with 2018, creativity, originality, initiative, idea generation, design thinking, etc., etc. So there's some kind of congruity between 1943, when they were starting anew, building a new society after the war, and 2018, when people think something's happening. And then Stenhouse, which I like the best, is to develop an understanding of human acts, of social situations, and of the problems of value which arise from them. So it's that question, what are we doing this for? What's the purpose? Looking at education as only a means to economic growth or personal earning represents an impoverished metric of human well-being. And there's a danger as we go forward that we're doing this all for business. We're doing it all to turn ourselves into effective, lifelong commodities for business. And as we know, education is a lot more than that. And then, this is really, really annoys me. This word, deliver. Deliver. Since we had a national curriculum, this word came into my environment. The government wants us to deliver on. Teachers deliver. They don't teach anymore, they don't engage, they deliver. I had my colleagues say, I'm delivering today at 2 o'clock. I said, do you work for the post office? No. Do you work for Amazon? No. Right, so this delivery, it's like, I'm going to deliver this to you, and you're going to learn this package delivery stuff. It's just nonsense. It's nonsense, but we don't question it. So delivery is just something I hate delivery as a word, and we should cut it out totally of anything to do with education. And then exams. Exams, again. How many of your students still go and sit in a room with a pen and paper and write exams? Yes? Why? Why? When do you ever sit in a room and write things down with a pen that's timed? When? Why? It's ridiculous in the 21st century. Again, 1943, Back to the Future. At present, the examination dictates the curriculum. This is very important. The examination dictates the curriculum. So the change thing, we can only change if we change the examination. That's the key thing. You can only change if you change the examination system, how you examine. It confines experiments, limits free choice of subject, hampers treatment of subjects, encourages wrong values in the classroom. I would like to meet this guy Norwood. I'd like him to appear now if I had a time travel machine. Come, tell us what to do, because I think we've forgotten some of these things. Okay, so exams is a thing that I'll talk more about. Then, which pedagogies can open spaces for purposeful development of human agency? So by human agency, I mean the ability of people to have some control over their lives and what they do. And should we not be teaching people to be agents of their own destiny in some way? So, I'm sure you will all recognize the picture on the right in some of our universities. If I went into our university, it would have this picture. Everything would be in rows still. Yeah. So there's some nice quotes. Again, I do tend to like the 60s for some reason. I was born in 1961, but I don't know. But Carl Rogers, I cannot teach anyone anything. I can only create an environment in which they can learn. The managed learning environment. Yeah. The main issues are not so much what ground to cover in the sense of what subjects to teach, but what information, ideas, and experience to grapple with through what media and by what means, which is Stenhouse, who's my hero, Stenhouse. And then 1990, one's best and happiest moments occur when a person's mind is stretched to its limits in an effort to accomplish something challenging and worthwhile. I know you've seen your students sleeping at the back on their phones because they're not challenged, which is the challenge thing. And then Nassim Taleb talks about leave people alone under a good structure and they will sort things out for themselves. So my whole thing is about how do we open this space for people to be able to learn in a natural kind of way, but how do we maintain structure within that space? How do we do that? Nomads, so digital. I said to a colleague, I've got a colleague in Wolverhampton and he works with schools and he works for the Learning Technologies team for the Wolverhampton Council, and he goes to all the schools and he teaches the kids to code and stuff like this, and he said, what are you doing in Belgrade? I said, I think I'm going to talk about educational technology. And he said, oh right, what are you talking about? I said, I don't know, because I've got nothing left to say about educational technology, because I'm more interested in how we teach in the digital age rather than the technology, because the technology is here, isn't it? It's like, so what? Everyone's got a phone. Technology's here. We just need to find out ways to use it purposefully. So sometimes it's a curse and sometimes it's a blessing. Obviously the internet is a blessing, but it's also a curse because it knows everything that I want to buy. It tells me what I want to buy every time I turn it on and things like that. And kids spend a lot of time playing computer games and all the rest of it. So I think there's this idea that there's a danger that we build these digital citadels where people have to go to learn stuff, where I think there can be a mix between the citadels and the nomads. So the nomads can go and put their tent anywhere and learn anywhere. They don't necessarily need to go into one of these managed environments and citadels to do that. But that's a bit contentious. And I'll probably get the sack when I go back if anyone sees this. So that's the end of my little 15-minute spoiler for this afternoon, when I'll talk more about some of these issues and some more as well. So it's really learning in the digital age. What kind of education do we want? Is education a right, or is it a commodity? And if it's a right, or is it a right and a commodity? But if it's a right, then it's our right, and what kind of education do we want in an age of disruption and change, where there's an opportunity to change and an opportunity to do things differently? And hopefully the classrooms will look more like this than the previous one at the end. Okay, thank you.
So I'll start with a question.
Okay.
Because I can.
Got a microphone.
Yeah, I have the mic. It's actually a great. I got the idea. You started with the idea that you were the only one out of your friends who went along in education. And your next slide said skills, attribute, values, and capabilities. Is that really an answer? And to what extent is that an answer? Is it really enough for us to teach our kids to think differently and to change the way we teach, and for them to think? And then to break down the entire structure of social dimension that says, oh, statistically you're doomed. And to what extent is that an answer? And you seem optimistic, that's why I'm asking. I would say very little, looking at statistics.
First off, it was a question, not an answer. But
Yeah.
I think that's why it's back to the future, because we could do it in the past. You went to university and you had, liberal arts education, you had criticality, you had critical thinking, all of these things. But I think these, because the narrowing of the curricula and the focus on, there's nothing wrong with people learning things at university that's going to get them a job. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's more to it than that. So all of these things which will provide the lifelong ability to change and adapt are these things that you mentioned, the resilience, creativity, ingenuity, being able to talk to people, negotiation, communication. All of these soft skills should really be the curriculum as much as the computer engineering skills. Or the balance is wrong, is what I'm saying. Yeah. Thank you.
So do you have more questions? Yeah?
Mr. Royle, would you say that online degrees can be compared effectively to traditional ones? I know that English universities pioneered this kind of
that's
trade,
of trade. That's a very good question. It depends on how it's done, I guess. I think people go to university, or people embark on higher education for an experience as much as a product. And the question is, does the online degree give the same experience and value of experience as a face-to-face, being at university type degree, where there's a hidden curriculum, you meet different people, you hear different viewpoints, you do go to societies and do different things? Or is that too expensive a luxury for us now? So that doesn't really answer the question, but I think if you just want to get a degree to do a particular thing, then online is fine, but it doesn't give you the same value and experience. So for example, a few years ago, people were saying, universities are going to collapse, no one's ever going to go there. But I don't see that happening, because, if you look at Cambridge University or Oxford University, people still want to go there. If you could say you can do an online degree or go to Oxford, what would you do? Yeah, so.
I beg your pardon. Is the mixture, sorry?
Sorry.
Is the mixture of online and traditional way of studying that could be the answer for the future?
It could be an answer, yeah. It Could be. It could be an answer. Yeah. I think it's more about what we do online and what we do offline, and how we do it. You know, so if it's there's Marshall McLuhan, who wrote The Global Village and all that in the 1960s, said we always use new technology to do the work of the old. So if it's just a replication of the face-to-face but online, it's very poor. It's a poverty. You know, it reduces the value to me, in my opinion. But yeah, so I think it could be a mixture. It depends, but it depends what we do in the spaces. Yeah. Hi.
Thank you. My name is Tijana Dabović. I really appreciated your presentation. Being born in the socialist country, I do very strongly believe that we do need ideology before being user-oriented or business-oriented. We need to sort these things out, but I am afraid that in this environment, there have to be a very strong agents about changing this perspective of education. This is more as a comment than a question. Right. I would just like to add, you made the conclusion of your presentation with the question, right or commodity. Yeah. Recently, I have been also asking myself, is it an obligation to be educated, or is it a privilege? Right. Who has the privilege of being educated? And I think that in these terms also is strongly associated with the questions that you are drawing today. And yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll make a short comment. I think all societies educate their people, don't they? So if you're a bushman living in Africa, you're educated in the law of the bush, or you know how to survive. So when education becomes when education becomes aligned to one particular interest group, then it becomes a privilege, or it's no longer education to me, to align to one group. Yeah. I didn't think I thought that before, but now I do. So thank you for the question. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Royle. Thank you, Madame Mongenou. You said at a point we have to open up the space, the classroom or the university, whatever, to learn or to provide learning in the most natural way. Yeah. Could you be more specific, please?
It's looking for pedagogies that do that. So, for example, a good example, to some extent, online learning can do that. Flipped learning can do it, a step along the way, but I think design-based learning strategies and problem-based learning strategies, challenge-based learning strategies, these are very simple rubrics. They don't need a lot of money, and they can start to break that space open. Obviously, then they might become the orthodoxy, and they don't work everywhere, so we always need to be agile about what we do. But I think as a starting point, those kind of pedagogies from the past can open the space for the future.
Just one more, if I may. Yeah. Soft skills is something, these are something that are, so it is what we learn, what we teach, as well as how we teach. I mean, we have to change that as well.
Yeah, I think it's also what we do, or what the students do. And these are, when we say soft skills, they're not soft skills, they're hard skills. They're difficult skills. We know that because we argue every day, don't we, with our friends, and so we're not very good at it. So so all of those things that we need to collaborate and do things together at a local, national, and global level are the skills we need. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. All done? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.